Hi guys. Okay, I had to make a slight change to the document. The line counts were off slightly. So if you printed out the demo lecture that I've been going off of, just be aware, you can quickly make notations on the side. But as it is, I've inserted another page. Just FYI, if you notice any slight numbers off. Okay. So I'm going to see how far I can get just to slam as much into this one slide. So I'm going to try to get ahead of the curve, so to speak. This is where we left off. And we've learned some material about Prufrock, more about his nervousness, having to meet people. He's reasserted his issue about a question. He's using images about that. He's talking about being indecisive, and he's developing more his motif with tea time. And we talked about how Michelangelo and women, as a combination, can show fear in his life, how it produces a fear in his life. It's all based on low self-esteem. Okay? So, the beauty of this piece, again, his low self-esteem, this is how he sees himself: thinning hair, slightly skinny, or extremely skinny. And we are reasserting the images of time, the element of time, and the fact, right here, this one little line I should stress, I did not stress in the last video. He says his necktie rich and modest. Most critics use this as evidence of his upper class status. He's in the proper attire for the noble man. Okay. He even has a morning coat. Okay. So this is all tying into his image of the proper modernist man, who happens to be very flawed. Okay. Now, because, now I'm going to straddle this, because line 35 and 36 mention the women, okay, and he mentions the women again here with the pronoun they, okay, one would assume that the pronoun them in this upcoming stanza would again be referencing women, but actually it's not. So notice how he's going to twist the expectations even from stanza to stanza. So I'm going to read these two stanzas and then explain them. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? Okay, so again, this pronoun them, you can pick up from just following along the opening couplet. Them, in this case, references evenings, mornings, and afternoons. What you might tie into this in a strong analytical fashion, notice he goes evenings, mornings, afternoons. His day starts in the evening when he goes, when he considers going out and hunting, looking, seeking prostitutes, or considering a prostitute. And then you have the morning after the event, whether or not it was successful. And then you have the afternoon period where you recover from the morning. Okay? You prepare for that evening trip. So his day-to-day existence is scheduled, but it's not the average person's schedule, the average working person's schedule. He doesn't like the fact his life is scheduled and in control. He is lonely, and he has measured out his whole life, his whole existence on a day-to-day basis. He knows exactly what's going to happen. He's going to follow the same pattern every day. And that's why he knows it's the same amount of coffee scoops or spoons of coffee to go into the coffee maker. His manservant will make it for him, bring it to him, and it's the same thing every day. He's in a rut. He's in a mundane rut. Okay, now, this couplet here, lines 52 and 53, this is an excellent use of intertextuality. The line "dying with a dying fall" specifically is from a comedy, not a drama, but a comedy by Shakespeare, and it's near the beginning stages of the play, and one of the actors is commenting about music. Okay, so when Eliot the poet uses this in the poem, in Prufrock's mind, Prufrock is twisting it to mean something different. So, one, you're shown evidence that Prufrock is well versed in academic Shakespearean lessons. He can quote Shakespeare lines and manipulate them to suit his own lifestyle. Okay? And two, it's showing that he is diverse in his classic upbringing. Okay? The average working class man would not be dealing with these type of readings. Okay? Now, the way it twisted, dying with a dying fall is basically referring to an orgasm. It's when, you've seen it in TV shows even, and in movies, the character, when they reach a peak, starts moaning and crying and exclaiming, screaming if they're in great pleasure, and then it slowly fades away. That's a dying fall. Okay? So he's saying it's like listening to music. Now, the music is not in the same room with him. So what can be implied is that Prufrock is in one of those one-night cheap hotels, and there are poor construction, poor structure, thin walls. You can hear what's going on around you, what the other prostitutes are doing with the other clients. So he's in one room, and down the hall he hears someone else having a good time, but it's not him in his room. So this is an example of how even when he is in his immoral activities, he is feeling isolated. He is feeling let down by society. Now, you might have picked up on the repetition of this line, so how should I presume? And down below in line 61, and how should I presume? These will repeat one more time on the next page. And when we get there, I'll explain it. But basically, the idea of presumption is a major part at this stage of the poem. He doesn't want to make the mistake of presuming another person's reactions to him. Okay, that's the main thing I want you to carry with you for this moment. He doesn't want to misread another person's reactions to him. Again, the shift between these two stanzas is a whole new topic. We are moving from time elements now to women's eyes. Women's eyes, if he's in a room with a woman or at tea time with a woman and they having a conversation with him face to face, he will feel like when they look at him, they are being overly critical of him. So this stanza, I'm going to highlight the whole stanza for a second, ties in with the previous stanza where he is, oh, here we are, in line 40, where the women are looking at him critically. Okay, so the connection between what is on page 6 ties in with what's on page 7, but he's taken it in a slightly different fashion. Okay. Now, when in this instance the metaphor is taking it that he feels like an insect. Remember, he sees himself as slightly bald and skinny, so he's just like a perfect little beetle, and he's being pinned to the wall through the glances of women because they're, to him, they're being overly critical. He's very self-conscious. That's why he feels like he's pinned and wriggling on the wall. It's sort of like those display cases of butterflies and beetles you see in natural history museums as well. Just like an insect in a display case, as I put here. Now, where it says the butt ends, you may know of this reference even in this modern age. It's just like the leftover remains of a cigarette or a cigar, the remains that you spit out and toss in the street. Litter, basically. His days and his ways are just like litter. So again, you got this tie-in to filth and litter. Okay. So earlier it was eyes. Now we're going to go to, as I've highlighted here, arms. And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight down with a light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. Should I then presume? And how should I begin? Okay, I'm going to go backwards with this stanza. The last two lines again are about that presumption. We'll tackle the meaning of this presumption when we get to lines 75 through 85. Okay. But notice there's a shift. This presumption is about how should he begin to react to a clue, a physical body language clue that he sees. What is he supposed to do with it? Okay. So the idea is taken up a notch. Critics have noticed the way he treats these arms. They are women's arms. He is referring to women, but it's slightly in a phallic direction. So take it or leave it. I like to say some people see it as a major part of this stanza, mainly because what's about to happen in the upcoming stanzas. It's sort of like a foreshadowing, maybe. You could defend that. I'll phrase it like that. If you wanted to defend it, you could. What's also important about this short stanza, he is acknowledging that he gets off topic a lot. And in this particular case, he's wondering if it's a lingering scent of perfume from someone's dress that he's happened to experience in his life. Okay. Okay, so moving forward. Now, these punctuation points, they're not ellipses, but they're divisions. Depending on the publication you're looking at, some do not utilize these at all. So apparently Eliot had more than one version of this published, and it depends on which one you're looking at. I prefer it this way. I think it's important to have this divided from the rest of the poem. It's like you're listening to a symphony and you've moved through the first movement, and now you've got this really short interlude, and then you're going to go to the second movement. Okay. This is on a totally different topic. It's a relating topic, but it's a whole new idea. The same themes, same motifs, but it's treated differently. Okay? So, you'll see where it's going. Okay, so shall I say, he's asking himself, shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? And then you have this ellipses. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. Now, at this point, I still feel a little sorry for him. I might have mentioned that earlier. It's not yet his whining has gotten to me. So, and I've gone over this poem hundreds of times. And so at this stage, I still feel sorry for him. So again, it is a question he's asking. Eliot is giving you a expectation that when he says the smoke rising from the pipes is going to be referring to more pollution and more dilapidation in the downtown warehouse district of a major city. However, it's actually not factory pipes, working class factory pipes, chimneys. It's actually men smoking as they lean out of the windows. So this is before we had radio. This is before we had cinema. It's before the average person could afford to go to the theater. Okay, so there's not many distractions in a middle class or lower person's life. A lower middle class and lower. A working class individual, all they could do at the end of the day, go home, have dinner, sit with the family, and then maybe lean out the window, smoke a cigarette or a pipe, and talk with the neighbors who are also doing the same thing, leaning out the windows. They did this in New York City as well. You'll see pictures from the time period. Now, the thing that's really relevant here, yes, he's looking at men, and yes, these men are lonely. Yes, they're working class men. But what makes this even more significant, notice the ellipses. We've got a pause, as if he's considering something, and then he sidesteps it. So, remember, way back at the very beginning, right here, the other major ellipses he used when he's talking about an overwhelming question, where he says, don't ask it. Okay? So now, in the middle of the poem, it's like he's revisiting the question without mentioning the question. You see what I'm saying? It's like he's hesitating. He's accidentally stepping into the territory of where the question is, and he's almost about to ask it, and then he sidesteps it and says, I should have been a lobster or a crab at the bottom of the ocean. I've been dehumanized by society. Okay? So other critics have pointed out that because these men that he's looking at are working class, that more likely, or another possibility, it's all about class divisions, because Prufrock is in the upper class, and he's looking at these lower working class individuals who are have a sense of camaraderie, who are in like a fraternity of sorts of working class individuals. They're brothers, so to speak. So they can communicate and they're not lonely. Whereas Prufrock is lonely. He doesn't have anyone. He has his manservants, yes, or maybe one manservant, but he doesn't have a partner, a friend, a comrade, anyone to talk to. He just has himself and the occasional prostitutes that he may or may not be renting. Okay. Okay, now you got another division, and now we're going to pick up again where we left off. In this particular case, we're back to the main discussion of women, his isolation from women, and we're back to time, mentioning of time. Okay. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor, here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. Okay. Now you remember the presumption that he was talking about earlier. How should I presume? It's popped up again. Okay. Here, the presumption is not named, but it is given a more specific time interval. You know this presumption that he's worried about happens directly after tea time. Tea's at 4, so by 4:15, 4:20, maybe even 4:30, the idle chit-chat's over with, you're through with the tea, you're going to have more casual conversation, and then maybe if you're lucky, she'll let you hold her hand, you'll kiss her cheek, and it may progress further. But these are upper-class women. Okay? So, once again, the presumption is slowly increasing in depth. We're learning more and more why it's an obsession for him. I did mention here that time appears as a domestic indoor cat. Okay, it's stretched out on the floor. You could even say that's like a pet dog if you wanted to. But you got this almost animalistic approach to the figure of time. And here is one of the first major biblical allusions that Prufrock drops into the conversation. He's comparing himself, in a sense, to St. John the Baptist, who had his head cut off. He was martyred by King Herod at the request of Salome, when she did that seductive dance in front of King Herod. So, aside from the allusion itself, due to its erotic undertones, okay, even though it's in the Bible, it has an erotic undertone. The major part here of this allusion is Prufrock is telling you he can't be a prophet. He's admitting it out loud. He knows he can't be a prophet. You should be asking yourself, why is this important to acknowledge? Okay, so we've talked about prophets, and we've talked about seers, S-E-E-R. We've talked about all of these people who see the future. Okay, when you see the future and can predict the future, it's like a warning. You can tell people what's about to happen. You want to make changes in society. You want to warn the world the apocalypse is coming. Prufrock is not a prophet. He can't see beyond the set lifestyle he's established for himself. He sees the schedule the mentioning of the coffee spoons. But he can't see beyond that. He can't see how this is being an effect on anything. So that's why he's not a prophet. He doesn't know what his future is going to hold for him, and that worries him. It bothers him. This is probably another one of my favorite lines, the eternal footman. It's a personification that's dropped into the poem. The footman himself could be fate, could be death. And it's acting as a servant to Prufrock. You get that from the fact it says, hold my coat. And notice this figure is snickering. So despite it being death or fate, either one will work, the reason the figure is snickering is not because, let's say it's death. It's not because death is saying, okay, now I'm going to claim you and I'm going to take you to the next level of existence. No, that's not the thing. Death and or fate are laughing at Prufrock because they know he has a long life ahead of him. Okay? He's going to live a lonely, miserable life. And he is a joke to the eternal footman. The footman is letting Prufrock live in order so that death or fate can get some entertainment out of their existence. That's why Prufrock is afraid. He knows he's going to have a long life. Mundane, caught in this endless loop of repetition day after day after day after day, with no one to share his existence with. Okay. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. Okay, so this is another stanza where I'm going to go backwards. Notice here it says, if one, settling a pillow by her head. By the construction of this sentence, you know one is referring to women. Okay? And because there's mentioning of tea in the opening lines of the stanza, you know this is a figure of a woman he's been with during tea time. And she's putting a pillow by her head. And she's saying, that's not what I meant. Okay? To speed this along, if it was a face-to-face class, I'd stall it out for one more stanza. But as it is, this is going to be repeated again. This little scene is going to be repeated again. But it's basically confirming his fear of women. Okay, he does have a strong fear of women. It's his fear of being rejected by a woman of class is a greater fear in his life. So that's why he's afraid to approach a woman of class. Okay? He would want to be with a woman of class. And notice how I phrase that. I'm not saying he wants to be married. I'm saying he wants to be with a woman of class. He just doesn't know how to go about it. He doesn't know the exact proper body language that a woman uses when she's trying to seduce the man. And that scares him. So he's afraid of making a casual mistake. Not a casual mistake, a grand mistake. And be ostracized by society. So the thing to keep in mind, this is almost like it has happened to him in the past, and he's remembering it and repeating it over and over and over. Because this you and me up here, this is where critics say this could be a physical woman who's in front of him, or a woman specifically in his mind that he's thinking about. Okay? So, likewise, here, when it says, besides you and me, that's another woman. His fantasy woman. A woman in his imagination. The big argument here, if it is a woman of his fantasy, it's in his head. So, in reality, he's really not talking to another woman, he's talking to himself through a fantasy. Okay? So you could play with that all you want in a critical paper. Okay, I've talked for half an hour. I'm going to break it down here. So I should be able to do the last 3 pages in one more video. So, hope you're going to have a good weekend. Stay safe. Be careful. Don't do anything silly. I'll talk to y'all later.